Yeah, lovely to meet you all. As Anna said, my name is Nikki Stones, VP of Marketing at CleanHub. I'm going to talk a bit about, so basically what we'll do today is I'll just give you a bit about my background, and then we'll talk about the problem of plastic pollution, how CleanHub is solving that, and then sort of dig into the real meaty topic of, and we can sort of have some good discussion around this, hopefully, around how we can communicate without greenwashing. So my background, I've been in marketing for about 20 years, and it's funny when you do these things and then you have to work out how long you've been in marketing, and I've been just 20 years, which is a bit scary. But anyway, I started off in large organizations. So I was at KPMG for about 10 years, then a big energy company, and then I moved into startups. So I've been working in different startups, tech startups actually as well, Tracy, for until CleanHub for just about 10 years. I wouldn't look back now. I love it. It's quite interesting as a marketeer. It's relentless. There's no doubt about that when you're working in startups, but also immensely rewarding. So I really enjoy the sort of building everything from the ground up. My previous company was a tech startup. It was a data privacy software company. And that was really interesting. It was just pre-GDPR that we launched. I was the first marketeer, sort of scaled up the team, 8th person in the company, and sort of scaled it up then to post Series C. And then I think, like a lot of people in COVID times, had a bit of reflection. I'd been there 5 years, and sort of really made a decision that I wanted to take sort of everything that I'd learned there. It was an amazing journey, but actually put that to use in more in the environmental space. Particularly, and then somewhat serendipitously, I saw the ad for CleanHub, and they were looking for a VP of marketing, and it was an early stage startup that's looking to solve plastic pollution. So I'm going to sort of go on a little bit about that in a second, but also just a bit more context about me. So I'm also a charity trustee for Concern Worldwide, which is an international development charity. It's actually the biggest international development charity in Ireland, but sort of slightly less known in the UK, although it is one of the 15 leading aid charities that form the Disasters and Emergency Committee. They're very much focused on ending extreme poverty. So that's the kind of that's their key focus area, operating in about 25 countries around the world. And I think it's really interesting, I think, when you think about Concern, because they're also doing humanitarian response as well. So things like the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, and of course, Ukraine. And whenever I see anything like this on the news, you always sort of think, when everybody else is fleeing somewhere, there's actually some people that work for these aid charities that are then flying in. And I have immense respect for everything they do. I was really fortunate, actually. I got to go on my first program visit to Sierra Leone in February, to see their work on the ground, and it was really interesting in a number of ways. I mean, I got to see educational projects, educational livelihood, all sorts of different projects that were in place, but it was quite interesting somewhere like that. So it was my first visit to West Africa, really memorable for me in many ways, but also you could see the impact of things like the FCDO funding cuts, because so Concern had actually been in place. So it started in emergency response, so back in '96, I think it was, so during the war, and then sort of trying to sort of help the country get back on its feet, and so very much now has moved into development activity. And so obviously that's really positive, but as a country, it's still facing immense challenges. So huge gender-based violence rates, illiteracy rates, maternal mortality rates, but under, the funding has actually dried up. So it's really, it's an interesting space. That the charity space has got huge challenges with funding, not just the funding cuts, but also actually fundraising. So I could do a whole session on Concern. So I won't digress too much, because we're here to talk about plastic pollution, of course, and CleanHub. So with that, I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint by any means. I'm just going to share some photos while I just talk through a little bit, just so I can bring a little bit of colour to what we're doing. So can you all see those? Yeah, I can't always see you with these. So let me just, all right. So, I mean, I think we've got obviously an educated audience here. So I think we all know plastic pollution is a problem. We don't need to talk too much about that. But what I think maybe we can just sort of level set a little bit just about, so we're all sort of on the same starting point of kind of just how bad it is at the moment. 400 million tons of plastic waste is produced every year. That's only going to go up, obviously. It's really hard to know how much plastic waste enters the ocean every year because, you know, a lot of it now, we've been hearing a lot about microplastics. And of course, when plastic does sink to the bottom of the ocean, we don't know how much is there. We certainly can't recover it. But it's estimated that it's sort of between 11 and 14 million tons. About 80% of the plastic waste entering the ocean comes from land-based sources. Only 9% globally is recycled, which still I find staggering. It is, you know, it's absolutely bonkers. The waste, the most common waste items that we find in the oceans and the rivers are things like, say, plastic bags, no great surprise, plastic bottles, containers, wrappers. And actually, when you think about things like containers and wrappers, so, you know, think about, I don't know, when you get a hummus, you know, you get a hummus package and there's a film on as well as the plastic lid, you know, that film is not recyclable. Crisp packets are not recyclable. Sweet packets are not recyclable. And for any of you that have traveled around Asia or South America, you know, when you could sort of see on the side of the street and there's those little sachets of shampoo and things, which in theory, a really good idea because it makes these things accessible to people that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it. But that stuff's non-recyclable. And so that's a real problem. And, you know, the key thing, I think, again, with plastic pollution is honestly, there is no silver bullet at the moment. What we definitely do know we need systemic change. There's some really encouraging things that are happening. So there's movement on a global plastic treaty and things like that are happening. There was a conversations in Paris last week. But yeah, there is no silver bullet. We definitely can't recycle our way out of this problem. But definitely two things do need to happen. So we need to transition to more circular packaging solutions and business models. But we also need to enable waste management in pollution hotspots. And basically, that's where CleanHub comes in. But I think the real challenge for brands today, if you think about this transition to circular packaging, for a lot of brands, the problem is actually there aren't that many viable alternatives, if any, at the moment. And this is the problem, right? So we find a lot at CleanHub actually that we get people that are actually, there's a shortage of recycled material. So a lot of brands now, especially some of the bigger ones, want to partner with us because they want access to our feedstock of plastic waste so that they can then recycle it. Hygiene reasons, you know, if you think about food safety standards and things like that, then obviously there's standards that have to be met. And so there aren't necessarily alternatives. Performance reasons, cost, you know, unfortunately, it is a big factor. And, you know, there are some really exciting innovations, but even those are not straightforward. So some of the brands that I've spoken to recently have tried, for example, using sugarcane for packaging. But then there was a sugarcane shortage during the pandemic. And so you kind of need the plan B, or, you know, the carbon footprint, actually, yes, it's not plastic, but the carbon footprint might actually be higher with an alternative. We've seen this actually, I don't know if you guys have seen Absolute Vodka have just launched a bottle, which is not going to be glass, it's going to be paper, but actually it's still a polymer. And it's still not great. And actually, we think it might be worse than plastic, you know, and or glass and things like this. So it's hugely complex, I think, with these things. But I think, you know, when all that's said and done, of course, plastic reduction has to come first. That's the key thing. And all brands should sort of be looking at that and being like, actually, what can we do to actually reduce the plastic? But then the best way, we believe, at CleanHub, for brands to have, if they want to act today, the best way to have significant impact is to fund waste collection systems in coastal regions where they don't yet exist, and that's where we come in. So there's the image that you can see here. This is a landfill in Indonesia, which is near one of the places where we're working. You can see here people live here, right? So there's a huge informal sector as well. In plastic recovery, people are living on the landfills. More than 2 billion people globally aren't connected to effective waste management. So it's a huge issue. And again, if you've traveled around Asia and South America and stuff, what you might have seen is people burning small fires in backyards or sort of things like this. And this is people burning their waste. And so, yeah, it gets burned in a backyard, or it might just get, unfortunately, just thrown into nature, not through their fault. There is no waste collection. And I think that's really important to remember. Or it gets in landfills like this. And yeah, when things like monsoons come and things, that it still ends up sort of making its way into nature. So what we're doing at CleanHub is the idea is we want to prevent plastic pollution at scale by building global infrastructure to collect this plastic waste in these high leakage locations. And so far, we've recovered more than 2.7 million kgs of plastic waste. And the key thing for us is, unlike alternative approaches, we're not focusing on recovering plastic once it's in nature. So things like, if you think like the ocean cleanup is doing, and, you know, some some valid sort of work in collecting what's already in the ocean. We want to stop it from getting there in the first place. So by putting in this waste infrastructure, we're putting in place things like household collection, stuff like that. But as I say, I mean, I think the other factor is this huge informal sector. So in a lot of these locations, actually in the global south is much more resourceful than we are. In the West, right? We've obviously got this throwaway culture and things like that. They're much more resourceful. So anything that can be recycled or, you know, collected will be. So a lot of these people that are living here on this landfill are collecting things like your plastic bottles because then they can sell it and they can make some money. But the informal sector has obviously huge issues. I mean, these are the living conditions. They haven't got proper pay. They're very much marginalized by society. So what we're trying to do is basically work with collection hubs across Asia and most recently Africa. And actually Asia is a gateway to, I think, 80% of plastic that ends up in the ocean. We operate in Indonesia, so where this photo is taken, India, Cambodia and Tanzania. And then we work with waste entrepreneurs so that they can build up viable businesses to collect plastic waste that wouldn't otherwise be recovered. So we collect all plastic waste, but we focus on the non-recyclable stuff because, as I say, anything else will get collected. And then the big focus for us is to make sure that actually we've got, you know, the social change is happening at the same time. So we want to move people away from these landfills into proper jobs where they're getting proper pay. You know, there's labour laws where there's safe working conditions, where they're getting access to healthcare. A lot of the people that we're working with are women in our operations. I've been lucky enough to meet some of them, and you know, they're earning money for the first time. Actually, some of them. There's a lovely lady in Kerala who was sort of very proudly was saying she doesn't have to ask her husband for money anymore to do things. It's the first time she's actually earned her own money. And so, you know, this is yes, we're here to solve plastic pollution, but this sort of environmental impact and social change absolutely have to go hand in hand. And this is the key thing. And it's like, if this goes hand in hand, and if we put the right waste collection systems in place, then we're going to stop the plastic from getting there in the first place. And where we want to get to with CleanHub then is that then we've got all of this feedstock of the plastic that can be recycled, and then we sell that back to the brands, and then we become circular. And, you know, all of these things drive that big change, basically. Another kind of really important piece, I'm too busy talking, I'm forgetting to go through the photos. So here you can see here, actually, this is some of the collection actually I've been on the left hand side, actually, this is in Kerala in India. This is a really lovely village called Konad, and they used to, I've seen the photos before, I've sort of seen the before and after photos. They had no waste collection. It's right on the beach, and there was just plastic waste absolutely everywhere. And we've got, it's now become kind of community-led thing. So basically they do their collection, then they pass it on to they work with CleanHub, and then we make sure it all gets processed properly. And it's all the women that are doing this, and they're going around and collecting the waste every Thursday like we do here. But this is transformed the place, and like the village is spotless now, and they're all super proud. It's really lovely. And on the right hand side there, you can see that actually then, so this is where everything gets sorted to make sure that actually all the plastic is getting treated in the best way possible. And again, this wouldn't have happened before. So anything that can get recycled is, all the non-recyclable stuff gets turned into energy. So a little bit exactly the same as what we do here, effectively. But I think a crucial thing here, you can see she's got protective hats, she's got gloves, they've got machines, so they don't have to bend down, and they're not sitting in the waste. All of these things that are in place that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And we audit all of these collection hubs, so we make sure that actually all of this is, you know, they've got the social compliance is in place. We do spot checks and all of these things to make sure that it's actually adhering to our standards, right, which is critical. The other really important thing on this is we need, and this links to the greenwashing point, and we'll talk about this a bit more in a second, but we need to provide the evidence, right? We need the evidence that actually what we say is being collected is being collected. How do we know they're not just collecting the same stuff and sending it round and round again? And, you know, we're sitting here in London and Berlin. So we've built a track and trace system, which is basically to organise and ensure collection. So all of our collection hubs have got a CleanHub app, and they track the recovery of plastic waste from collection through to responsible disposal. Every bag of waste is weighed, is photographed, and the quality is monitored by our AI alongside manual checks. And then the images that are sent via the app, like on the AI, can actually detect things like compliance anomalies and things. So if somebody's not wearing gloves, you know, the alarm goes off and says, actually, there's a problem here, or if there's problems with volumes of the waste bag. And so, you know, with all of this, we're able to make sure, yeah, everything's being compliant, but also we can monitor this, every sort of all the weight, all the plastic that's being recovered. So when I say to you, we've collected 2.7 million kgs so far, I can say that with confidence. And any brands that we're partnering, when they're communicating about the impact they're having, what they've committed to, and then what's been recovered, can be confident that that is actually happening. And that's actually critical when it comes to greenwashing. And I think, you know, it's an interesting space in plastic pollution, because we're way behind things like actually with carbon and things like this. It's actually quite an early market in some ways for this. There is no market standard for this stuff. So it's really important that we're super transparent. And we're the first system actually of our kind to be verified by an auditor. I can never say it properly. It's TÜV or something. It's a German auditor. But we've been verified by them just to make sure, you know, we are doing what we say we're doing and stuff. And as I say, that's really critical for brands to have that confidence. And then leading on, again, I'm probably doing it again here. Yes, here's the social impact. Here's the ladies that I met that are, yeah, they love their job. And I sort of, when I was in India at the beginning of January, and it's lovely, there's real banter between them and they're teasing each other. One of them's really good on camera, so they were sort of teasing her about being the star. And, you know, it's a really lovely working environment, a very far cry from sort of what was happening before, which is really great. This is here, you can see the app. So this is the scan, everything's weighed, we've got all the evidence for everything. I mean, you can, on the website, we've got a live dashboard so everybody can see literally every photo that's kind of coming through. And again, that evidence piece is just so important. And then, yeah, how we work with brands. So I guess, yeah, some of the London-based brands or the UK-based brands that people will know about. So Grind, the coffee company, we've recently started working with them. So they just launched their Better Coffee Foundation, and we were the sort of big part of that. Press, the juice company, I don't know if you've come across those. They do like really good green juices and things. Floral Street, that are in Covent Garden. They do perfume. Vuori is a athletic wear. So lots of different brands, all really cool brands. They want to take action. Their consumers are asking for action. They want to be doing something. And then what we're doing with CleanHub is effectively connecting them to the front lines of the plastic crisis. So offering them a solution that they can take action on today. They fund the plastic collection. And then in return, they get access to our badges that they can put on packaging. There's an impact report which provides the evidence of everything that they've collected. We've got a content hub, so they get access to this content hub, and that gives them everything they need to tell their stories. So social media templates, on the ground stories, like videos of what's happening on the ground, content packs for awareness days, for World Oceans Day, for example, campaign inspiration. As marketers, obviously, we all love to see what are other people doing, inspire me. I want to see some other ideas. And they can use things like our e-commerce integration. So, you know, if they want to drive better conversions on newsletter sign-ups, you know, sign up here and then we can collect more plastic waste, or a click to collect on checkout, that sort of thing. So yeah, from my side as the VP of marketing, something like this is quite, and for my team, it's quite an interesting position, because we're having to communicate about CleanHub's impact and make sure that, you know, we're on the right side of everything when it comes to greenwashing, but we're also helping other brands to do the same, give them guidance, create content for them. Some of them have got marketing and sustainability teams because they're much bigger companies, and others are actually, it's, you know, it might just be a company starting out, so they're really quite dependent on us. So yeah, it's quite interesting on that side of things, and we've learned a lot along the way, and you know, what we're doing has evolved in terms of how we're communicating. And I think I'll open it up because I'd love to hear a bit from everybody as well on their sort of experiences. But when I sort of always think about greenwashing is, you know, obviously some people are doing this intentionally, right? And they have to be called out, right? This is really, really important. But oftentimes that's not the case. Actually, sometimes it's just mistakes. And we've seen this even at CleanHub. So somebody might sign up with us. They're a founder, the VP of marketing, they partner with CleanHub. They're really excited about it, want to launch. Then they say to their social team, right, push something out about this partnership. But these guys haven't been involved in the conversation about CleanHub at all. They don't know what we're about. They might have a quick look on the website. And what we always have to monitor is things like, they'll be saying things like, you know, CleanHub collects plastic from the ocean. We don't. Right, we just don't. We collect it, as I said before, we collect it, you know, from we're doing household collections and things like this. So it's that sort of unintentional greenwashing. It can get called out, and often it's just mistakes. So the key thing, obviously, we need to make sure that we're doing is that, you know, we're we're helping sort of have all the right checks and balances in place, and sort of think, what is it that we can be doing as brands just to make sure that sort of the unintentional stuff isn't happening. And of course the stakes are getting much higher with increased regulation. There's a new EU directive which is currently in the planning, and I think that they're proposing that it could be up to 10% of revenue fines for greenwashing, or up to 300,000 for individuals. So the stakes are getting much higher. There's more regulation coming in the UK. I mean, this is good, right? I'm very supportive of the fact that we need more regulation, definitely. But that also means that as brands and as marketers, we need to be on top of this. And I think, the challenge for us is we always want to communicate in a really short and pithy way. How can we be as catchy as possible, and all of these things, but then you can sort of think, I'll just leave that word out, or I won't say this, these are unnecessary words, and actually that's when you could end up exposed. So yeah, I've been talking for quite a while now, and I'd love to hear, I guess, just from everybody in the room's perspectives of kind of, I've got a lot of examples of greenwashing. I can talk about some do's and don'ts and things like this, but I don't know, maybe some people in the room of their sort of greenwashing pet hates, or some of the challenges that people have faced when they're trying to communicate about sustainability.